Ordered gold and silver star by the Emperor of Japan for promoting India-Japan relations. Welcome, Ambassador Sir. We have with us Sri Sanjoy K. Roy, who is an entrepreneur of the arts and managing director of Teamwork Arts, which produces over 33 festivals in 42 cities and 17 countries, including the world's largest literary gathering, the Jaipur Literature Festival, and international editions of Jaipur Literature Festival. He is the founder trustee of Salam Balak Trust and also co-chair of the Art and Culture Committee of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry and former president of Event and Entertainment Management Association. Welcome, Mr. We have with us Ms. Namita Gokhale, who is the author of the 21 books, including 11 works of fiction and editor of numerous anthologies. She is also co-founder and co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. She has been recognized both for her writing and her commitment to multilingual Indian literature and cross-cultural literary dialogue. Welcome, Ms. Gokhale. We have with us Professor Malashri Lal, former Dean, the University of Delhi. She specializes in literature and women's studies, about which she has 16 books to her credit. She has Harvard University and Newcastle. She was a senior consultant to the Ministry of Culture and has served on. She is currently member of the English Advisory Board of the Sahitya Academy. Welcome, Professor Lal. And we have the architect of the book, Ms. Reba Som, who has studied history at College, Kolkata, standing first class was both in BA and MA examinations, and obtained her PhD from Calcutta University. She was the recipient of the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship in 2000 to 2002, and she was the founder director of the Rabindranath Tagore Center, ICCR, Kolkata from 2008 to 2013. She is author of several books. Dr. Som is a trained singer of Rabindra Sangeet and Nazrul Giti, had compact disc album, selected songs of Rabindranath Tagore, Saregama 2005, and love songs of Qazi Nazrul Islam, Times Music 2016, also include her English translations of the lyrics. With this brief introduction, may I request Ambassador Sir to release the book and others to join. I request Mr. Martin to come from the publisher side, please. Thank you very much. Now I request Ambassador Sir to take the discussion forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Usha. Let me begin by wishing Reba happy birthday. So this is a very special occasion because it is on her birthday that her latest book has been released, and for all her friends, and particularly in my case, Himachal was a batchmate and a very dear friend, and for many years we have been together, and also because Reba is someone who is not just a historian and author, but she is somebody who is a very talented and accomplished singer. She has also been a very distinguished scholar, and as you would have seen, she has written several books ranging from politics to now, in a sense, a biographical kind of a book. The few remarks that I would like to make, because we have a very distinguished panel here. I really went through this book. I did not hop, skip and jump. I really actually went through the book. As you can see, all these flags which are there. And this is really a remarkable chronicle of, one may think that this is all about, having served in this capital, having served in some other capital, having come to India, but it is much more than that. Not only does it carry, these sort of very, shall I say, incisive insights into the societies and the cultures that she has been exposed to, the kind of interactions that she had with very interesting people throughout this long stint in the Foreign Service. But also what I really appreciated about the book was that really a lot of it comes really from the heart. It's not a contrived kind of a chronicle. It's something which really, I think, it shines through the book, that it is really from the heart. Tremendous candor, except for the mystery that she has. Maybe it's not really a mystery, but it's like asking us to do some detective work, because she describes some ambassadors who may not necessarily have been her great favorites, but their names are not mentioned. So because their names are not mentioned, a curious person like me says, oh, during this time, who must have been the ambassador in Brasilia? Or who must have been the ambassador in Copenhagen? So it was also stimulating in that respect, that it made you sort of do some detective work as well. Lastly, what is really great about this book, particularly for people from the Foreign Service and those who are coming into the Foreign Service, is a very candid and I think, shall I say, a somewhat hard-hitting, commentary, I would say, on how Foreign Service wives are really perhaps some of the most underappreciated category of people in the world. It's really quite amazing, what she has written, because many of us who have been in the service are very familiar with that. But many husbands are not, in fact, perhaps aware of the kind of challenges which this career poses for the wives. Yet there is this very nice, poem that somebody called Nandini, I think. I'm not quite sure which Nandini is this.
And you have
You see what I mean? So she throws these names and personalities, and you have to, really do some digging to find out who they are. And what Nandini says in the magazine is, I am what I am, but I am not what you want. I am a traveler, you want a nomad. I like cooking, you want a cook. I like people, you want a hostess. I want a partnership, you want it all. I have a mind, you keep it locked. I want recognition, you think it is PNS. I am a woman, you want perfection, I am what I am, I think I will be what I am. This sort of really sums up, the kind of a challenge that, being a Foreign Service wife is. So thank you for bringing this into your book, because I think it's very, very worthwhile, especially as I said for our young colleagues, to really right at the beginning, see what it's going to be like. Perhaps it has changed. Perhaps it has changed quite a bit from the time that Himachal and I had joined the service, and for the better, I think. But it's really, it was very important. So thank you for that. Let me not take more time, but I will now, as chairman, invite Mr. Shantanu Roy Chaudhary, Editor-in-Chief, Home Book and International, please come on stage and to please introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Saran, and a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Home Books International. It's this is very few books that you actually go through like a breeze. You know, the book just goes through you, and you just sort of. This is one of those. Right from the moment that Namita called me, and I was watching a film in a hall, and I couldn't take. And a lot of people do call me when I'm watching films. I do, and she called, and we did the book, and I got to know a new word, Peregrinations. I did not know of this before, and it's in all my 20 years of publishing, the first author who actually invites me home and sings Ravindra Sangeet and Nazrul Giti at lunch. So, you know, it's been one of those books, delightful. Thank you, Namita. Thank you, Reba, for doing this. I'll not take too much time here. There's just one thing, since Ambassador Saran has already mentioned it being Reba's birthday, I have a small little cake, which if you could just cut on the table.
And only one will be enough for everyone.
Sunil, there's place in front. I think mine is good enough. Lighter. I think we should match. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay, so, sorry, are you going to cut? No? Okay. Thank you, Shantanu, and thank you for this very, very moving gesture, I would say, of bringing this cake to observe Reba's birthday. Thank you. So let me now get into the panel discussion. As you know, we have Sanjoy, Namita, Malashri with us this evening. And what, instead of asking them questions, I thought perhaps for about 5 minutes or so, each one of you could just share your, sort of encounters with Reba, the kind of impressions that you have not only of her but her book, and anything else that you want to maybe talk about. So I'll give the floor first to Sanjay. Sorry, I made a mistake. Your order is wrong. Let me before Sanjay, let me turn to Reba, the author of the book, to say a few words to introduce you. Sorry.
Thank you, Shyam. Thank you, audience. It's wonderful to see all of you here. And gosh, this has been quite something, to cut a cake and eat it too. This has been the most fun book for me to write. The reason is that all my previous books have been serious academic books, all in fulfillment of various fellowships, and I've worked on Gandhi, Nehru, Subhash Bose, Rabindranath Tagore, Sister Nivedita was the last. All that required serious work. And then COVID came, and we were all under lockdown. And I was in Greater Noida, in the IFS Villas complex. And in the basement of my house, we were all housebound. I came across all these albums with photographs, and there were old letters, and there were press clippings. And from each photograph, there came a memory. a stream of consciousness, a story. And I started writing, and there was no stopping. And actually, it was great fun. But I poured my heart into it. I bared my soul. It was catharsis, never for once thinking it was going to be published. And finally, when it all sort of came together, it was my ever enthusiastic, ever encouraging daughter-in-law, Arundhati, please stand up. She's the one who said, Mama, go ahead, you need to publish. And then, of course, Malashri, my friend of many, many decades, encouraged me even further. And then I spoke about it with Seanjoy in Houston when I went to one of the Teamwork Litfest events. And then, of course, dear Numita, who pushed it in the right direction. And Shantanu was so enthusiastic and so particular and so efficient that he just brought this whole thing out in record time. So I would like to thank Om Books, I'd like to thank Neha, Ruchika, Ajay for this wonderful work that they did to bring out this book in time, and I'm very pleased with the way they brought it out. I want to thank India International Center for co-hosting this program. And of course, my book starts in 1971, when I was a bride, and with Himachal, I went on a plane for the first time, which took me to Brazil. And on the way, of course, we were in Delhi for a while, and it's that 22-year-old that Shyam met for the first time. And in fact, as he mentioned, Himachal and Shyam have been batchmates, and although their career paths took different directions, we as families have remained very much together with our shared memories of having begun this journey all together. So it's been one of those journeys that I undertake in the book, which, as I've said, it's a bit of a catharsis. But when I look back, I think it's incredible how the wide expanses of the planet that we had actually hopped, skipped, and jumped. Right from Brazil to Denmark, to Pakistan, to New York, to Dhaka, to Ottawa, to Vientiane, Laos, to Rome, before calling it a day and returning to Delhi. Much of this was in the last century, before the age of internet. India has changed since. The Foreign Service has changed since. And many of these stories that are recounted may really be of archival interest, because I speak of the diplomatic bag, for example, which was our only link with home. We were too poor to even make phone calls. I remember in Brazil, at the end of the day, we just had about money to buy an ice cream each, because the inflation was so terrible that we couldn't afford anything more than that. Making phone calls was out of the question. So as a bride, I go to Brazil, which was so far away, and didn't see my parents or family for 3 years. And then what made me feel at home? I mean, I looked around at the cattle. Can you imagine? The cows. The cows looked familiar. They looked like our cows. They had beautiful eyes and they had lovely horns. They were not like the rather ugly-looking European cattle with red short eyes. So I asked about these cows, and they said it's called Gujara, from Gujarat. And that's how they'd come many, many years ago. And then I found out when I went to shops that, the names of so many things sounded so familiar. And then, of course, one realized that language has also traveled, with Shavi for Chapi and Janela for Janala and all kinds of things. So then I started feeling at home, and it's really a small world after all, as the famous Disney song goes. And it's been that for so many of our postings, when you suddenly find that human beings all over the world, you speak different languages, you come from different spaces, but somewhere we have something in common which binds us. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Reba. Since you have spoken so little, everyone will have to buy the book to read it. I also just wanted to add that, for me, the sense of nostalgia because of the portions relating to Himachal, who was a very good friend, and someone in whose company, one was always laughing and joking. He had so many, humorous stories to tell. There is one thing which I wanted to say, which perhaps is also a sense of guilt, because you mentioned the fact that you will give him a tiffin with very plain food to take to the ministry. She does not realize that some of us, batchmates, used to meet together for lunch. This was because only a few of us at that stage had rooms to ourselves. And I was one of them because I was handling personnel. So people used to gather in my room. And of course we used to open our little boxes. And so would Himachal. Then by common consent we would agree that the food that was in front of us was simply not worth eating. And all of us would order kati kebabs. So we share some of the guilt that about him being a foodie, because it was not just him. Thank you. So now let's turn to our panel, and now I turn to Center.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Saran, and everybody, happy birthday, happy Amrit Mahotsav, officially. It's an amazing book. I mean, picking it up and reading, the cover is fabulous, so congratulations on the cover. It really sort of is very evocative in the hop, skip and jump. But when all of you, and many of you here collectively from the Foreign Service, there's wonderful stories in there about their travels, but what really comes through, and we all know that Himachal was always larger than life and his whiskey was larger than that. And the food that followed was also larger than both the whiskey and the life that he enjoyed. And Reba was always this, not necessarily quiet and suffering, but certainly, fairly quiet compared to when Himachal walked into the room. And I remember one day, when she was making this decision about going to her new job, which had been offered, which was at the Tagore Center in Calcutta. One day she ran, and I don't know whether she remembers, she rang me up and she said, Himachal is dead against me going. And Vishnu has been supporting Himachal, and Vishnu keeps asking me, who's going to look after Baba when you go? And there's no way you can go. And then she said, but Abhishek has been fairly supportive, and he's saying go. And I said, what do you want to do? And she said, I think this is my time. I really want to explore what I haven't explored. And it's not anymore about me having to follow necessarily Himachal, but I really want to do this. So I said, do it, it'll fall into place. And of course it did. What I didn't know that he plotted at the end of your term to ensure that you didn't get an extension. Yes. What comes through in the book, and you all must read it, and I would love to, and I'm sure at dinner we'll have a conversation asking Reba about her work on the Uniform Civil Code, which she alludes to pretty much in the beginning of the book. But really what comes through is she is a person that, despite being a Foreign Service wife, and they have to juggle making 100 or 1,000 samosas for Independence Day and Republic Day and keeping the table and going from place to place and packing and unpacking and looking after Abhishek and Vishnu. What comes through is that despite all of this, she stuck to what she wanted to do, which was her research, which was her writing, and inevitably and invariably going back or staying back or coming back to India to be able to pursue her academic work and her research work, which I think has given rise to such a rich array of writing. I remember the first time we took Reba out, I think it was South Africa, we did a Words on Water thing in, I think Ambassador Bhatia must have been there. And Reba, explained Tagore through his music. But she brought Tagore alive, not necessarily just because of the music, which was alien to most people who had come to the conversation, but in the way that she described the poet and the way that she translated the poetry that she was singing. She made it relevant, it was deep dive, there was a depth to it, and it allowed you access to this great Nobel laureate poet who earlier we had versions of the original Penguin translation that he had done, which was a kind of English, which today will be seen as fairly stilted English. But Reba brought it alive and certainly opened my mind and eyes to revisit Tagore's world. I mean, my Mamar Badi, which was my mother's house, is also part of the whole Jawra Shaku thing, and there was a lot of interaction between the two families. And Tagore's grandfather and my grandfather, there was a lot of stories. So it really brought that alive. And this sense of, despite everything, despite the travails of the Foreign Service, that you can, as women, still achieve what you want to do, and you don't necessarily need to subsume yourself into the service. I asked Ambassador Saran a little while ago, I said, I know that there was this whole sort of petition that the wives or the partners of the ambassadors and the other Foreign Service people should be given an allowance because they do equal work. In fact, Ambassador Saran, some wives would have made better ambassadors than the ambassador, but I won't name who and what, and I think all of you would know that. But really, the work that they do, not just keeping the house and serving those dinners, but being empathetic to the new ones who've come into the service, the language probationers, the new wives, etc., is huge. It's a human resource activity that wives do, and that really is the strength of it. Reba, many congratulations doing this. I would particularly, and many of you know or may have visited them when they were in Rome, the way Reba takes you in a journey through Rome through her eyes is quite different. It's refreshing, it's impassioned, it shows you the city in a completely different light. It's also where she went on to record a new album, she found new friends, and in all of this, what was the connection? It was literature, it was music, and the arts. And all of us know that we tend to dismiss that as, these cholawalas or, art kar do ya free mein kar do ya naach do. But today, everything, I look at it as leveraging this as smart power. And arts and literature and music and tradition and culture and food is part and parcel of every diplomat's life. If you have to explain India to everybody, whether it was Arun in Washington or Sham in Pretoria or wherever, it is through this. You root yourself and you root your guests through the tradition and culture, your costume, your food. That is how you enter India. So it's not just you, it's the arts that really is the ambassador. Sadly, it's still not given the kind of importance that it needs. Himachal was a great maverick when he was at ICCR and did all sorts of things, and I think Namita will allude a little bit to one of the projects that he got going, which was in many ways a precursor to the Jaipur Literature Festival. But truly, there's a great wealth and richness in it. It's not about soft power, I'll say it's about smart power. And I know many of you in the room have used that. So thank you, Ambassador Saran. Reba, once again, congratulations, and to Om Books for agreeing to publish this fabulous.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Let me now turn to Namita.
Can you hear me? So I'm just going to read out some memories I noted this morning of the time I have spent with Reba across continents, across decades. And it was a delight to read this book because it's a magical memory box for the readers also. Because every decade is documented in what's happening as she remembers it, as she watches it. It is witty, it is light-hearted, and yet it is deeply observant and intelligent. And I was saying it could be a primer for Indian diplomatic spouses and their distinguished husbands, but he said that things have changed, and indeed they have. But you paved the way through difficult times. I've known Reba for over 20 years now. Her husband, Himachal Som, was a friend, and we could laugh together. And Reba described him as irrepressible. And that is the best word to describe him ever. We worked together very closely on the first Nimrana International Literature Festival in 2002, which led to the unfolding of so much else after that. He would talk a lot about Reba. You don't know this, Reba, how much I had to listen to his adoration of you. And I also remember, I was trying to remember the story, I hope I don't get it wrong, but there was a complicated story about how he fell in love with you in a library. And which has got muddled up in our mind, and I couldn't find what happened in that library. Probably he was much too noisy in his declaration of love. You tell me about it later. And then you write about a skit where when they were leaving a particular country, and there was a little farewell skit where the person who was acting as Himachal kept saying, Reba, Reba, Reba. Well, Reba and I have traveled together and had long conversations. She has never ceased to surprise me with the range and the depth of these talks. I remember Dr. Malashi Lal and I staying in the embassy residence in Rome on our way to our Bellagio residency. I'll never forget the Indo-Italian fusion cuisine which Himachal cooked up as Reba tried to work on her book on her study. I remember those things. There was chana pasta and incredible food, but he was a very persistent eat-it person. We didn't eat in our first week in Bellagio. Then I remember listening to her giving an impromptu teatro musical performance in Goa by the banks of the Tirukul River in Dona Paula. I don't know if you remember it. It was a festival which Mala had organized, not a festival, a seminar on the supernatural of all things. Then I remember sitting with her in a deserted bar in Tel Aviv on Sabbath day, as we examined our two very different lives and paths. It was a very intimate conversation because there was nobody to give the order, take the order, but we persisted, and there was nobody in the bar, and a very lovely evening. I remember discussing her book on Sister Nivedita across its different stages. I remember a conversation about Michael Madhusudan Dutt during an interminable taxi ride across London. I remember this book coming alive. So many memories brought back by reading this book, where I felt the reader, and me in particular, was a ghost presence traveling along in your suitcase along all those things. Hop, Skip and Jump is a travelogue like no other. It takes us on a lively journey around the world, but what also comes through is a glimpse of Reba's formidable inner resources, as in giving 2 examinations in the midst of her wedding day. I mean, 2 days of the wedding, she has 2 examinations, and
2 days after the day after the wedding.
It is incredible, and of course, yeah, she gets all the gold medals and comes out smiling, which we know she always would. But then I also read towards the end of the book about her ability to converse with herself. And this I'm going to quiz her more about, because the book itself is like a long conversation with herself. But apparently she does anyway routinely have these conversations with herself ever since she was a child. So the joy this book gave will stay with me and with all of you readers for a very long time, and it's a gift to your friends and your family. Thank you.
As Ambassador Saran has just stepped out, can I ask Maladi to?
It's indeed been a very great pleasure, Reba, to read this book, Hop, Skip and Jump. Reba and I met way back in 1972. And I think what Reba has produced in this book is something that tells us about the art of living. As a woman, an intelligent woman, who has the capacity to reinvent herself over and over again, as her diplomat husband moves from one glamorous posting to the other. And I use the word glamorous in inverted commas because it's quite obvious from the book and from what we have heard from the others that outwardly there are these amazing travelogues to these brilliant places that all of us, particularly in those days, could only dream of. But people like Himachal, Reba, other members of the Foreign Service, they actually went there, lived there, experienced the culture, the language, the diversity of places such as Brazil and Dhaka and New York, etc. But what Reba has done in this book, I think, is to show the amazing ability to adapt to circumstances and get the best out of it. And some of it is also very humorous because the tone of the book is enchanting. It's very difficult to write an autobiography because one tends to have too much of the I in it. But Reba has been able to put herself a little back into that story and present a beautiful life narrative where she's able to watch her own life almost like a witness and the life around her as a cultural ambassador and as a supremely observant person. So there are two things that I want to focus on, and I'll do this very briefly. This whole business about work-life balance that we see. And when I first met Reba, this was at Delhi University, and she had a perfectly good and stable job as a very gifted historian. She gave that up in order to be with Himachal on his postings. That's not an easy decision. And then when she went into this life of constant changes, there was this negotiation with parenting, which I'm sure came up time and time again. It does for all of us who don't move, but somebody who's moving every 3 years into a new environment, parenting and motherhood must have been extremely challenging. But the way she presents it, and Abhishek is here, and I'm very glad to mention that there's this amazing description of New York. Here is Reba and Himachal unpacking, having just come to New York. On one hand, she has her doctoral dissertation to engage with, so she goes to Columbia University and tries to get herself a membership to the library to become a visiting scholar. On the other hand, she is vastly pregnant. So what is going to happen now? And then one evening, there is a bit of a crisis and she has to go to hospital. So she does go to the hospital, and then she finds that the people are very attentive and all that, but the nurses are terribly distracted. So she wonders what's going on. And then she hears that there is Elizabeth Taylor, who has come to the same hospital and is on the floor above, and no, she's not having a baby, she's getting a facelift. She's getting a facelift. So here is an Elizabeth Taylor on one floor and there is Reba on the other floor. So I'm actually going to read this wonderful passage as to how Abhishek came to be with us. From the excited chatter of nurses, I realized that they were distracted by the admission of a new patient on the floor above. It was Elizabeth Taylor who had come in for yet another facelift. But I could not really forgive their magnificent distraction when on the day of my discharge, as I sat in the company of my pediatrician with a goodbye hamper from the hospital staff, the bassinet that was wheeled in had a little white boy. On my protestations, the black American nurse shouted rudely, "Can't you read? The tag says Som Jr." Shocked by the implication, I answered back that not only could I read, but I could also see. And that was not my child. While my doctor and the hospital public relations staff looked on in disbelief, another nurse wheeled in my bundle of joy. The babies just had their diapers changed and were put back into the wrong bassinets. This was yet another encounter I had with the deep-set prejudices among those ignorant about the world outside. So that's the kind of beauty of writing that I admire deeply about the book. There is the description and there is the philosophical side to it. I'm going to take 2 more minutes if I may, because I want to jump to the other spectrum of Reba's life when she was director ICCR. And that was when she was able to take on a full professional role as an administrator, as a creative person, and give her best to a very, very demanding professional situation. At that time, there was the Government of India's 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Tagore that was going on, and along with Namita, I was on the Central Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Culture. So I had a lot to do with what was going on and many opportunities to interact with Reba in her professional role. Now, she thought up the most amazingly different programs with Tagore. And I'm going to just mention one of them. How many people in the audience know that Rabindranath Tagore actually endorsed commercial advertisements? Now that definitely came as news to me, that he endorsed ads. And I said, gosh, how did this happen? And then I, again, going to read out a little bit from Reba's narrative. The nationalist agenda could be seen in many of the advertisements, such as the one for radium cream manufactured by Boschak factory, which Tagore wrote hugely benefited the actors in his dance drama. He added that the cosmetic items of this company were no different from foreign products. Tagore had effusive praise for the sweetmeats of Jolo Jog, with special mention of Mishti Doi. And then he endorsed Shri Grita, that's ghee, and he quipped that this would surely heal livers already damaged by inferior products. And then his recommendation for Darkin and Sons, the pioneers who manufactured the harmonium, Tagore wrote that he was so satisfied with its sweet note that he would like to place an order forthwith. So these are the human aspects that Reba is able to bring out, not only of her own life, but of luminaries such as Rabindranath Tagore. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Before I get into the second round, I just also wanted to refer to a very interesting incident that Reba recounts of the visit I think this was in the UK, where you found you went into the church and you found...
That was in Denmark.
Denmark. So in Denmark, the small plaque near the bottom of the coffin informed us that this was James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell, with whom the beautiful Mary, Queen of Scots, had fallen in love. So it's an amazing that there is this skeleton lying in a coffin, 400 years old, 500 years old. There is nobody in the church, and Reba strays into this church and has this, a very, very personalized encounter with this great man now lying in state. Of course, the body was taken away after a few days, I believe, but then, Himachal came and rescued her. Reba, would you like to, you have heard different panelists talk about, different aspects of your book and how they have, known you. Is there something that you would like to?
Well, I think the one word that Manashri used in many ways defines most of us foreign service wives. And that word is reinventing. Because every posting has been reinventing ourselves. Just the other day, a friend who was reading the book tells me that when I'm reading your book, you keep saying that each transfer comes as a sudden shock to you. It's sudden. Why is it sudden? We all know that it's going to be a 3-year posting. So I said, that's a man speaking. Because when a career diplomat gets a posting order, he knows Probably it's a promotion, probably it's some new assignment he's looking forward to. So for him, it's a very different take. And he goes into yet another embassy or a consulate office, which is part and parcel of the Ministry of External Affairs. The same protocol, the same filing, meeting colleagues maybe from other postings, the same flavor that all embassies and consulates have, no matter where they are in the world. What about the wife? She has to uproot herself. 3 years into a posting when she's most comfortable, when she's managed to find all the food ingredients that are necessary for all the parties she has to throw, and the children have just about settled into schools, that's when she has to uproot them all. And again go to a country, new life, new languages, new staff maybe. So for her, it's totally unsettling. It's disruptive. And I think it's important to say so. There's no harm in saying so. My friend said, why is it so? Doesn't she know if she's married a foreign service officer that she has to do this? Of course. But that doesn't mean that she can't say that it's unsettling. She's gone along with it. So I think perceptions of the role of a foreign service wife are important to be articulated. I think people have to realize what we go through. And that was one of the main things that I had actually done in 1998 when we were back on a home posting, and I was editor of the ISA magazine, which is the External Affairs Spousal Association magazine. And we said that we'd undertake a little survey of the changing role of the foreign service wife, and I'd sent out questionnaires which went all over to all the missions abroad. But what came back opened a Pandora's box. And there were all these ladies who were then complaining about what they have to endure. And I don't know whether I should read a little bit about that. I think I lost the page. Because at the end of the day, we all decided that we had to do something about it. I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, the viewpoints that had been put forward, that one lady said, Jayanti, again we have to do some sleuthing to find out who she was. In effect, MEA got the full benefit of a package deal, gaining services of 2 qualified persons for the salary of 1. Years of unpaid labor for the country by diplomatic wives went largely unrecognized. And contrary to general perception, the foreign service wife abroad was not at all a lady of leisure. She had to be an excellent housekeeper, with the freezer her best friend, always well stocked for impromptu hospitality. Emma quipped humorously that she had surely earned her MBA in administration and people management after years in the foreign service. She knows how to cope with the pressures of demanding house guests, tantrums of domestic staff. She has certainly mastered the art of conducting the orchestra of formal sit-down dinners. God forbid if you forget the 3 wine glasses or the underplates or the overplates. So this is the kind of thing that came out, all the frustrations that came out of this questionnaire. And Gayatri wrote that, imagine the shock when we return home to discover that our value in the job market has plummeted. We have missed out on years of working experience. We were overage for the jobs we are qualified for, and nobody is interested in how to make paneer with powdered milk at all. In short, we have put in so much of ourselves into our husbands' jobs, only to find that we have got lost somewhere along the way. So this is what really was the angst among many. And I remember we had at that point said, okay, let's do something. Let's take one issue. And that one issue is, why don't we ask the ministry whether wives of heads of missions could work if they have the professional qualifications, and if the host countries have no problems with it. The others, those who weren't heads of missions wives, they had been given permission, but heads of missions wives had a blanket ban. So we, got all charged up, and we went to the Foreign Secretary, the most amiable and a very benevolent and a very erudite gentleman, who looked at us and said, "Sorry, that's not possible." So you also have to do more sleuthing about that. But, and this is what was interesting, when we came back rather crestfallen, we just had to wait a little bit, because the next Foreign Secretary was a woman, and we got our permission. I don't know whether she is here today. She probably is.
Can you sing a few lines, please, for us?
Yes.
Absolutely. Sing a full line. Sing.
They would like you to read the few lines from
We want you to sing.
Oh, but are we at the end? At the end?
Well,
Should we sing a little bit more?
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, would you like to comment on this? Go straight into the song.
I have nothing more to say. The more I listen, the more I want to go back to the book and read the bits that I may have missed out. But there are a lot of life lessons in this book. What Mother said about reinvention, about persistence, about sticking focus to your main goals and doing all the diversionary things as well. And I look forward to some long conversation with you in some lost part of the world where we can discuss so much again.
Rebadi, maybe you'll share the story of the locket that you're wearing.
Oh, which I haven't written about. I was just mentioning. Sorry, Manju, you had something to say.
I just wanted to say that all the expectations of getting the work of 2 people at the salary of 1 is all well said. But when we got posted to Pakistan, everyone, I won't name the people,
I won't name all the people whom SK and I went to call on, but only one person I will name, Mr. P.N. Huxer. He said this is an opportunity for you to show how we should really live. And I came home and I said, on the allowances of a peon, probably.
Right. Yeah, the story of my locket.
Allowances of a peer.
Yeah, allowances of a peon.
Yes, I mean, that's right.
And no special allowances. They said you have to live like a viceroy. And I wanted to say, very well said, Mr. P.N. Huxer, but you haven't been to a posting for a long time. And you can't realize what we wives have to do with. And my late husband turned around and said, since on the 26th of January, and since the 15th of August is around the corner, the Indian missions are not allowed to serve any alcohol. But in Islamabad, people only wanted to come to our house to drink alcohol. So I had to devise a method that we show that we are serving Coca-Cola, but it was a glass full of whiskey.
Quite right, yes. Yeah, the locket. Well, this is a beautiful locket, gold locket from Bolivia. And this was from our time when we were in Brazil and we were dreadfully poor. And at the end of the month, if we could have enough money to buy ourselves 2 ice creams, we felt very rich because the inflation was a runaway inflation. And Himachal had accompanied our ambassador to Bolivia because it was a concurrent accreditation. And so he went there, and there were these shops which had these gorgeous Inca, this is an Inca sun god with an inlay. And Himachal kind of eyed it. Poor fellow, he didn't have the money. So the ambassador, who was quite an obnoxious man, he looked at Himachal and said, "You useless fellow." That's how you would call him. "You useless fellow, what are you looking for? You don't have the money to buy this." So Himachal looked a bit sheepish. And he said, "Okay, doesn't matter, I'll buy it for you. And because I like your wife. So I'll buy it for you, but you have to pay me back." And so Himachal came back and very triumphantly and gave me the locket, and I was shocked. I said, "You had to ask that man for money to buy me a locket? I'm not going to touch it until you have repaid all the loan." And so today I brought it out. I haven't mentioned this in the book, but it brought back so many memories of our time. That we had to battle constantly with inadequate allowances, while we had to look like princesses in our beautiful kanjivarams and our jewelry, and we had to speak well, and we had to sort of be on a level playing ground with the other wives of the other missions, who were all much better off than us. And we had to pretend that, all was well, when we were not. And I have a little story here, and this was when we were in Brazil. A little child in the mission, this was Sushil and Brinda Dubey, I do mention them, and Himachal had gone as third secretary to Brazil, and they took us under their wing, and their little daughter, Anna, was only 2 years old, and they would go to all these malls with these wonderful toys and so on, which they couldn't buy. So Brinda had to tell those children that no, we can't afford to buy those. Now the little girl Anna, she learnt it by heart. So whenever they had a party, she would come and she said, "We are poor children." "We are poor children." And of course, Brinda could have died in shame. But this was our lot.
Actually, just a query to Reba, that through all these ups and downs and changes, what kept you going? I mean, I have a tentative answer because I have been in your home in Rome, which was Himachal's last posting, and I remember the beautiful chapel where you would sing Rabindra Songit, and I've read your books. Was it Tagore and that Monir Manush, that inner divine that Tagore talks about, that was the continuous thread of your life?
There are two answers to that. One is, I will never deny that being in the foreign service has been deeply enriching for me. How else would I have traveled all around the world? How else would I have known so many cultures and so many people? Today I am what I am because of our experiences in the foreign service. Much as we might grudge about paltry allowances and so on, there's no two ways about it. When I left Kolkata as a 22-year-old, I was a tongue-tied girl who hadn't even gone on a plane for the first time, ever. And then when I came back to Kolkata as the director of the Tagore Center, I brought back with me this entire gamut of experiences which I then used to good effect. And that really helped me a lot. So I would always say that I've been deeply, deeply enriched by art experiences. But yes, Tagore has been the running thread in my consciousness. I've learned Tagore songs since I was 5 years old. But the songs that I learned then, I never really paid much attention to until much later, when I had to translate them and what Sanjay talks about, and translate it for the many festivals that Sanjay has taken me around the world with, to explain Tagore to those who do not know Bangla. And that gave me a greater understanding of the same songs. They suddenly came alive for me. And I think that's what Tagore is all about, his relevance, which is eternal. And even now, because Tagore his songs are, they have a gamut of emotions on which you draw for every possible mood that you have. And sitting in Greater Noida in the basement during COVID years, Yes, Tagore's songs gave me so much of peace, and they still do. So yes, I think Tagore, in many ways, and not only for me, for many of us who, I can see Jayati there, I think she would say the same, means something else. It's like a personal religion for Bengalis. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just sing a few of his songs, which are so deep and so profound that it gives meaning to your life.
Okay. Thank you, Reba. I'm glad that the Foreign Service at the end has redeemed itself. Thank you. Now we want to talk.
And reliving memories of childhood, I think it's very apt to sing this song. Of course, it's by Tagore in his translation with the same music, and even the Bengali is the same thoughts. So I'm going to ask Jayati. Come, Jayati. Come, you lend your voice with me. I think I would love that. Can we give her a mic, please? And many of you in the audience who know the song will also join. পুরানো সেই দিনের কথা ভুলবি কি রে, হায় ও সেই চোখের দেখা প্রাণের কথা সে কি ভোলা যায়। আবার পুরানো সেই দিনের কথা ভুলবি কি রে, হায় ও সেই চোখের দেখা প্রাণের কথা সে কি ভোলা যায়। আয় আরেকটি বার আয় রে সখা প্রাণের মাঝে আয়, মোরা সুখের দুঃখের কথা কব প্রাণ জুড়াবে তাই। মোরা ভোরের বেলা ফুল তুলেছি দুলেছি দোলায়, বাজিয়ে বাঁশি গান গেয়েছি বকুলের তলায়। মাঝে হলো ছাড়া ছাড়ি গেলেন কে কোথায়, আবার দেখা যদি হলো সখা প্রাণের মাঝে আয়। পুরানো সেই দিনের কথা ভুলবি কি রে, হায় ও সেই চোখের দেখা প্রাণের কথা সে কি ভোলা যায়।
Thank you very much. We are ending on a musical note and a fine one at that. We are simply out of time. We are, in fact, ahead of our scheduled time. Let me first of all congratulate Reba again, and thank you for sharing your experiences through this very interesting book. And as I said, I will be doing a lot of detective work for the next several weeks, trying to find out who these famous ambassadors are. Thanks to all of our very distinguished panelists, Navita, Sanjoy, Manashi. Thank you for being here. And thank you to the audience. As you can see, there is a full house, which just shows the esteem in which you are held and the affection with which you are held. Thank you for making this a special occasion. Thank you.
Nice passage. Reba and Manishri Lal, I want to sit next to you.
Well, I think every posting is a new challenge. And we have to therefore reinvent ourselves to find how we best can fit into a new cultural milieu and make the most of the opportunities that we get, try to settle the children in, and yet find a space for ourselves. So it is reinventing, whereas the men get into an embassy scenario which is really a continuum for them of the Ministry of External Affairs and so on. That's what I meant by reinventing. So one has to have the inner resources to be able to pick up a new language, find interest in the country you're in, explore it, and it's a new story altogether.
And what advice would you have for IFS wives who are going to different postings today?
It's a different scenario today. And they don't have to go through the chore of making samosas and gulab jamuns that we did, because India has come of age and we have good restaurants, Indian restaurants, and wives are much more focused on their own interests in a way that we couldn't because of circumstances.
Lastly, the role of Tagore in your life. Could you
Tagore has been in many ways a mentor for me. And continues to be so. Very profound. As I have written in my book on Tagore, that Tagore for Bengalis is like a personal religion.
I'm Bengali myself,
so it is that, because you dip into a Tagore poem or a song and you find immediately an answer, if you will, to a situation you're in because of the emotions, the rich emotions that they convey.
Thank you so much.